Regina woke up before dawn on the day she was to leave Lagos. The first thing she did was check her phone to see if Femi had called. He hadn't, but she knew he would be at her gate before sunrise. She pulled aside the curtain and looked out over her father's compound. The house was still, the sky just turning pale gray. She felt her stomach twist. It wasn't fear. It was something she couldn't name, like excitement and sadness mixed together. By 7 o'clock, Femi's black SUV rolled through the gate. He stepped out, looking fresh and handsome in a white polo and jeans. He carried her suitcase like it weighed nothing, though it was packed full with clothes, toiletries, and the new khaki uniform she couldn't wait to wear. "Are you sure you have everything?" he asked, smiling as he placed her bags by the door. "Yes," she said, though she checked her handbag one more time to be sure her phone charger was there. Her mother hugged her, reminding her to call every night. Her father, a tall man with a quiet voice, simply patted her back. "Make us proud," he said. Femi drove her to the airport in silence at first. Regina looked out the window, memorizing every street. Even though she had been longing for camp, now she felt nervous. When they arrived, Femi helped her with her bags again. He looked into her eyes, his own soft and steady. "You know you don't have to prove anything to anyone," he said. "If you ever feel like coming home, I'll be right here." "I know," she said, her voice small. He kissed her forehead, then pulled her close. She smelled the faint scent of his cologne, warm and familiar. On the plane, Regina kept replaying that hug. She knew Femi loved her more than anyone in the world. She felt grateful. She also felt like she was standing on the edge of something big and unknown. When the plane touched down in Abuja, the air felt different. It was drier, heavier. The airport was crowded with other Corps members, all wearing white t-shirts and eager smiles. She joined the line for the buses that would take them to camp. She had dreamed about NYSC all her life. In her mind, it had always looked bright and neat, with shiny parade grounds and cheerful songs. But when she arrived at the camp gate, her heart sank a little. The buildings were old, with peeling paint and rusty roofs. The hostel was a long hall with rows of iron bunk beds so close together, she could almost touch the next mattress without stretching. A single ceiling fan turned slowly overhead. Her roommates were friendly, Mary, who had a loud laugh, and Janet, who talked non-stop about her boyfriend. They helped her make her bed and unpack. But later that night, when the lights were off, Regina lay staring into the darkness, missing her own room back in Lagos. That first morning, a whistle blasted at 4:30. Everyone jumped up in confusion. Regina pulled on her white t-shirt and shorts, tied her laces with trembling hands, and ran outside. Soldiers were already shouting instructions. "Fall in. Move. Move." They were marched to the parade ground while the sky was still dark. The cold air made her shiver. The drills were hard. They had to stand for hours, learning how to salute, how to match steps. By the time the sun rose, Regina's legs felt like they didn't belong to her. She thought about Femi and wished he could see her now, sweaty, exhausted, and covered in dust. Maybe he would laugh. That evening, she called him as soon as she lay down on her bunk. "How was it?" he asked. "It was harder than I thought," she admitted. "You'll get used to it. Just be careful," he said. His voice calmed her, like always. The next day, everything felt a little easier. She knew where the bathrooms were. She learned to carry her bucket before the others took all the water. She even laughed with Mary and Janet about how terrible the food tasted. But she still couldn't sleep without hearing Femi's voice first. On the fourth morning, she felt dizzy even before the drills began. She tried to drink water, but her throat was too dry. "Regina, you look pale," Mary whispered. "I'm fine," she lied. But when the platoon leader blew his whistle, and they began to march, her vision turned black. She reached out blindly for something to hold on to, but nothing was there. Her body gave way. The last thing she remembered was the sound of shouting. Then, quiet. When she opened her eyes, everything felt slow and far away. She realized she was lying on the edge of the parade ground, her head resting against something solid. She blinked, confused. A young soldier was kneeling beside her, one hand steadying her shoulder. His face hovered over hers, worry etched into every line. "Can you hear me?" he asked softly. Regina tried to speak, but no words came out. His voice was calm, nothing like the other soldier's harsh commands. "Take it slow," he said. Her friends appeared, breathless, and knelt beside her. "Regina!" Mary cried. "She fainted," the soldier said. "Help me get her up." Together, they lifted her gently. As she leaned on Janet, Regina turned her head and looked back at him. He was still watching her, his eyes dark and steady. She didn't even know his name. But something in her chest fluttered as he nodded once, then turned back toward the parade ground. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She told herself it meant nothing. She had Femi. She loved Femi. But in her dreams, she saw the soldier's face again, calm and close, as if he was waiting for her to speak. The next morning, Regina felt weak but determined to act like nothing had happened. She refused to let herself be the girl who fainted on the parade ground. When she stepped outside, she felt the sun warming her face. The sky over Abuja was clear, stretching wide above the old camp buildings. Corps members were already forming lines, chatting and adjusting their uniforms. She spotted Mary waving her over. "You sure you're okay?" Mary asked as Regina joined her. "I'm fine," Regina insisted, though she still felt a little lightheaded. Janet leaned close and whispered, "Do you even know the name of that fine soldier who carried you?" Regina tried to sound casual. "No, why?" "He's called Lieutenant Gabriel Matthew," Janet said, her eyes big. "Everyone talks about him. He doesn't even shout at people like the other soldiers." Regina looked down at her boots. She tried to push away the memory of his calm voice and the way his hand had steadied her. As the day went on, she couldn't help scanning the field to see if she could spot him. Every time she saw a uniform, her heart jumped before she realized it wasn't him. Later that afternoon, she and her platoon lined up to collect their kits from the supply tent. She was bending to tie her laces when a pair of boots stopped in front of her. She looked up, and her breath caught in her throat. Lieutenant Gabriel was standing there, hands behind his back, his eyes steady on hers. "Hello," he said, voice quiet but firm. She felt heat rush to her cheeks. "Hi. You look better today," he observed. "I feel better," she managed, though her heart was pounding so loud she wondered if he could hear it. There was a small pause. His eyes were gentle, but something in them made her want to look away and look at him all at once. "I'm glad," he said finally. She almost thanked him again, but the words tangled up in her throat. He nodded once and moved down the line, checking the others. Janet elbowed her as soon as he left. "Your soldier friend came to check on you," she teased. "He was just doing his duty," Regina said quickly, but inside she didn't feel as sure. That evening, to distract herself, she decided to visit the camp gym. It was a small hall with old equipment, but at least it felt private. She picked up a dumbbell and tried to focus on her breathing, counting each lift. She was determined to prove to herself she was strong enough to handle camp life. But when she moved to the bench press, she picked a weight that was heavier than she realized. As soon as she pushed it up, it wobbled. She tried to steady it, but her arms trembled. Before she could call for help, the weight dropped lower. She felt panic rush into her chest. Then, strong hands gripped the bar and lifted it away like it weighed nothing. Regina gasped and scrambled to sit up. She turned, and there he was again. Gabriel set the bar down carefully and crouched beside her. "You shouldn't try this alone," he said, his brow creased. "I thought I could handle it," Regina said, feeling a bit foolish. His eyes softened. "Next time, call someone to spot you." She nodded, embarrassed. He offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it. His palm was warm and calloused. As she stood, she noticed he was wearing a simple black bracelet on his wrist. She wondered if it was a gift from someone. Thank you, she said quietly. You're welcome, he replied. He hesitated, then asked, would you like me to show you some safer ways to train? She bit her lip. Part of her wanted to run away. The other part couldn't say no. Yes, she heard herself say. He walked her through each exercise, explaining with patience. He never raised his voice. When she struggled, he encouraged her gently. Afterward, they walked back to the hostel together. The path was quiet except for the sound of cicadas buzzing in the grass. Where are you from? She asked, trying to fill the silence. Brono, he said. A small village outside Maiduguri. She looked up at him in surprise. Was it hard, growing up there? He shrugged. It taught me to survive. My father was a soldier. My mother sold vegetables. It was simple. Regina nodded. I've always lived in Lagos. My family is comfortable. I could tell, he said, glancing at her neat clothes. She laughed softly. Do I look spoiled? No, he said, his mouth curving into a small smile. Just different. When they reached her hostel, neither of them moved to say goodbye right away. They sat on a bench under a neem tree. The air smelled of dust and earth. She could hear the laughter of other corps members in the distance. You're not like the other soldiers, she said after a while. How do you mean? You're kind. His face grew thoughtful. It doesn't cost anything to be decent. She looked down at her hands. Thank you, for today. Again. Don't mention it, he said. A bell rang in the distance, signaling lights out. I should go, she said, though she wished she didn't have to. Good night, Regina, he murmured. Good night, Lieutenant Gabriel. She walked into the hostel with her heart beating fast. She tried to tell herself this was nothing. But as she lay in her narrow bunk, she realized she hadn't called Femi all evening. And for the first time since she left Lagos, she didn't feel so alone. The next morning, Regina woke before the whistle. For a long moment, she lay in the half-dark, her hand resting over her heart. She could still feel the warmth of Gabriel's hand in hers, the calm way he looked at her like he could see straight past everything she pretended to be. When the soldiers blew their whistles, she rose and dressed in silence. She lined up beside Mary and Janet, but her mind was far away. All day, she caught herself scanning the environment, hoping to see his tall figure somewhere near. Regina, Janet teased as they waited for lunch. You're not even here. You've been daydreaming since morning. I'm just tired, Regina lied. You sure it's not because of Lieutenant Gabriel? Regina felt her cheeks grow warm. He's just a soldier, she mumbled, though even she didn't believe it. After drills, she went to a quiet corner behind the supply tent, pretending to read. She hadn't been sitting long when she sensed someone behind her. Trying to hide? A deep voice asked. She turned around. Gabriel stood there, his uniform dusty, his eyes watching her carefully. No, she said, her heart hammering. I just needed some air. May I? He asked, motioning to the spot beside her. She nodded. They sat side by side, not speaking for a while. She could hear shouts in the distance and the clatter of plates in the kitchen. I'm sorry about yesterday, she blurted. For what? He asked, brow furrowing. For needing help all the time, she said. You must think I'm helpless. He shook his head. I think you're trying. That's all anyone can do. His words settled over her like a blanket, steady and warm. Did you always want to be a soldier? She asked softly. No, he admitted. At first, I hated it. My father made me join. But then, I saw how sometimes, you can protect people who can't protect themselves. That made it worth it. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she wondered what he had seen in the places he'd served. What kind of scars he carried beneath his calm face. My mother always told me I was too soft, Regina confessed. I never thought I'd survive here. You're stronger than you think, Gabriel said, his voice so low she almost didn't hear it. Something in her chest tightened. She didn't want to feel this. She wasn't supposed to feel this. But when he stood to leave and said, "See you around, Regina," she found herself wishing he'd stay. That night, Femi called. She forced herself to answer. "Hey baby," he said, his voice warm. "How was your day?" "Fine," she whispered, her throat tight. "I can't wait to see you," he continued. "You'll be home soon." "Yeah," she managed. "Soon." She ended the call early and lay on her bunk, feeling her heart pulling in two directions. The next day, she avoided the gym. She avoided the quiet benches. She told herself she needed distance. But after lunch, she was heading back to the hostel when she saw him walking across the field. He stopped when their eyes met. For a second, neither of them moved. Then he came toward her. Her breath caught as he stopped a few steps away. "Will you walk with me?" he asked. She hesitated. Every part of her said this was dangerous. But she nodded. They walked past the back gate, where the grass grew taller and the camp noises faded. "I'm sorry if I've made this hard for you," Gabriel said, staring ahead. "You haven't," she lied, though she could hear her heart in her ears. He looked at her then, and something in his eyes made the world tilt. "Regina," he began, but he didn't finish. They stopped near a neem tree, the leaves whispering above them. For a moment, no one spoke. The air was too thick, too full. Then, before she could think, she reached up and touched his cheek. His skin was warm beneath her fingers. He didn't move. Her hand slipped to the back of his neck. She felt his breath catch. "I don't know why," she whispered. His eyes searched hers. "Me neither," he said, his voice rough. And then she kissed him. At first, he was still, like he couldn't believe it. Then his arms came around her, strong and certain, and he kissed her back. Time folded around them. When they pulled away, she felt like her heart had burst open. "I shouldn't have," she began. "I know," he said. But neither of them moved to leave. After that day, they didn't pretend anymore. Every evening, she found herself near the neem tree. Sometimes they didn't talk. They just sat in the fading light, their shoulders touching. She still called Femi, but her voice was hollow. She hated herself for it, but she couldn't stop. With Gabriel, it felt like she had found something she hadn't known she was missing. One evening, as they sat in the quiet, he turned to her. "I've never felt like this," he said simply. "Me neither," she admitted. A shadow passed over his face. "I wish things were different," he said. She knew what he meant. But she didn't want to think about it. So she leaned in and kissed him again. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake, tracing every moment in her mind, her hand closed over the memory of his touch. In the morning, she woke to a commotion outside. Soldiers were gathered around the admin block. Janet ran in, breathless. "Regina, Gabriel has been called up. They're sending him north. He's leaving tonight." Regina felt the world go silent. She didn't wait. She ran across the field, past the confused Corps members, until she saw him standing by a green truck, reading a folded paper. He looked up as she approached. Her heart felt like it would tear in two. "I have to go," he said, voice strained. "They're badly in need of soldiers with sniper skills." Her throat closed. "Please, come back to me." He reached for the chain around his neck. He pulled it free, a brass necklace with a cross pendant. He pressed it into her palm. "Hold on to it," he whispered. "I'll come back for it." She nodded, her eyes swimming, and before she could say anything else, he turned and climbed into the truck. As it drove away, Regina pressed the pendant to her lips, wishing time would stop. The next morning, camp felt hollow without him. Regina woke up expecting to see Gabriel's tall figure across the field, maybe watching her with that steady gaze. But there was nothing. Just the sound of whistles and tired Corps members shuffling into formation. Mary and Janet tried to talk to her, but she only nodded, her eyes vacant. Every step she took felt like she was walking in a dream. She kept Gabriel's cross pendant hidden under her shirt, her fingers brushing against it every hour. She told herself it was proof he'd come back to her. He had promised. When she queued for lunch, she turned her head automatically, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Her heart lurched at the sight of any uniform. But it was never him. At night, she lay on her bunk, phone in her hand. Femi called twice, but she didn't answer. When he called again, she finally picked up. "Regina," he said softly, "I've been worried. You haven't called me back." She closed her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You sound far away." "I'm tired," she said, her voice flat. "Tired of me?" he asked, a note of fear in his voice. "No," she lied. After they hung up, she buried her face in her pillow. She didn't cry. She couldn't. Her heart was too heavy for tears. 3 days passed. She heard nothing. She asked quietly if anyone had news of Gabriel, but the soldiers wouldn't say anything. The silence was worse than any answer. 2 days before camp ended, Regina was sitting alone near the neem tree where she and Gabriel used to talk. She was tracing the lines on the pendant, memorizing every curve. Mary came running across the field, her face pale. "Regina." Regina looked up slowly. There's news," Mary stammered. "The soldiers, they were attacked in Bruno. There was an ambush." Regina felt her heartbeat in her throat. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "They said, Lieutenant Gabriel Matthew, he didn't make it." For a moment, the world turned silent. The leaves stopped moving. The air stopped breathing. Regina stared at Mary, her mind refusing to accept the words. "No," she said, her voice small. "Regina." "No," she repeated, louder this time. Her hand clutched the pendant so tightly the edges dug into her skin. She stood up. Her legs felt like water. She walked across the field, past people whispering her name. She didn't look at anyone. She just kept walking. At the parade ground, soldiers were gathered, their faces dark with sorrow. She searched every face, hoping, praying, it was a mistake. He wasn't there. She sank to the concrete step where they used to sit, her eyes locked on the empty space where he used to stand. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice cracking. No one spoke. The camp was too quiet, like the air itself was mourning. Janet knelt beside her. "Regina, please." Regina didn't answer. She just stared straight ahead, unblinking. People tried to lead her back to the hostel, but she wouldn't move. She sat there for hours, the sunset turning the sky blood red. When night fell, Mary draped a blanket around her shoulders. Regina didn't feel it. She didn't feel anything. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay on her bunk, clutching Gabriel's necklace against her chest so tightly it hurt. She thought about the way he had looked at her, like she was something precious. The way he had held her hand. The way he had kissed her under the neem tree. All of it gone. She thought about Femi, waiting in Lagos, expecting her to come home and pretend she was the same person she used to be. But she wasn't. Morning came, but she didn't rise when the whistle blew. She stayed in bed, her eyes swollen and dry. On the final day of camp, everyone was busy packing. People laughed and took pictures. But Regina moved like a ghost. When she stepped onto the bus that would take her to the airport, she looked back one last time. The neem tree stood in the distance, the leaves whispering secrets she'd never hear again. She felt like her heart had been ripped out and left behind. As the bus rolled away, she pressed her palm to the window, a silent goodbye. Years later, Regina never stopped wearing the cross pendant. No one ever asked about it, but she always touched it before she slept. Femi tried to love her back to life. He was kind, patient, gentle. But a part of her had been buried in the dust of the north with Gabriel. Sometimes she would sit alone in her quiet room, holding the necklace in her hands, and whisper his name over and over. She would remember his laughter, the way he'd told her she was stronger than she believed. She would remember the promise he made, hold on to it. I'll come back for it. And every time, she would break all over again. No matter how many years passed, no matter who she became, she knew the truth, she had loved him more deeply than she ever thought possible. And she would carry that love, and that grief, until her last breath. Thank you for staying till the end. Please like, share and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this.